Hello, all of my grade 10s. Mr. Flynn here with video. So just a few things before I get into the instruction. The first thing I want to say is I hope that you are healthy. I hope your families are doing well. I hope you're doing okay. As crazy as this sounds, I want you to know that your teachers miss you, right? We really miss you guys. We wish that we could be at school and keep teaching and working with you. It's really the best job in the world, and you guys are the ones that make it the best job. So I miss you guys a ton, and I hope you're all doing okay. The second little message is with regard to your mental health. I want you, as much as you can, while still being safe, and you still want to do the social distancing stuff, stay away from people, but you should be doing some exercise, a little bit of exercise every day. What I was saying is if you have stairs in your home, go up and down the stairs a bunch of times. And every day, challenge yourself to increase the number of times you go up and down the stairs. Now, this is going to drive people nuts, so don't do it when people are sleeping. You can also do things like, if you're comfortable with it, do a couple of sit-ups a day, do a couple of push-ups a day, and try and push yourself to get a little bit better with that stuff. Go out for walks. Again, social distancing. Don't go where there are a bunch of people. Don't go where there are crowds. But so I like to run a little bit. So one of the places where I run is right along the Cannon Street bike path. It's safe because it's a bike path, so the cars aren't driving there, and there's nobody else there. So it's all just me by myself, and I sort of run along. I get my run in and then come home. So it's good for my mental health. I also think that you should try and take some time away from screens. So some points in the day, try and put your phones down, try and put the iPad down, and do something else. Play a board game with your family. If you can, maybe just sit and have a conversation. Learn how to cook something in your family. So if you're preparing food, ask your parents or your guardian or whatever your situation is if you can help, right? Anything other than just sort of being on your devices. And then the third thing is reach out to people, but not just texting and not just social media. See if you can call people and have good conversations with them. Okay, so I hope you're all healthy. Okay, now I've got to get into some class stuff. Sorry. So the first thing I want to talk about is the project Your 1920s Self. And the one thing I really want to stress to you, I really want to make this clear so that you know, it is kind of a research project. Okay, so you create your own character and you're going through the 1920s, but you're going to do some research to show me that you know some things about the 1920s. So for example, what is your character's favorite 3 songs? Well, you're going to have to go and research what the songs were called in the 1920s, and choose from them to pick for your favorite character, for example. What dances does your character like to do? Go back and take a look at popular dances in the 1920s. You can throw in some 1920s slang. So you just go on Google, put in the search window 1920s slang, and see what pops up, and try and use some of that slang. What kind of things were new technology? So, for example, what was kind of brand new that was coming out technologically speaking that everyone wanted in their home? Now, a little bit of a hint, right? Electricity is becoming more and more common in people's homes. Most homes by the 1920s have electricity, or a good portion of them anyway. And so what new technology are they inventing for people to use electricity with? And that's kind of interesting too. So not today's technology, but from the 1920s. Okay, so, and really try and pack it full, like dig around a little bit. What were the 1920s like? I also want you to mention events. So for example, there was something called Prohibition in the 1920s. And as we mentioned in class, this is where they made the manufacture, distribution, sale, and transportation of alcohol illegal. Okay, so people could not engage in those activities during Prohibition. And so because of that, a lot of people were engaged in organized crime. Okay, and so what did that look like? So gangsters today, for example, deal in drugs. Well, in the 1920s, they were dealing in alcohol because it was illegal. The government had made it illegal for a short period of time. So that's what I want you to do with that project. Okay, and please hit me with an email, or I can call you at any time if you need any help. I'm more than happy to call you at home. Okay, so I'm going to do a short lesson today, and today we're going to talk about something called the business cycle. So what I want to talk to you about today is how business kind of turns things in an economy, or how one thing is connected to another thing. Okay, so I did some pretty bad... Oh, by the way, how do you like the beard? Okay, if you think I should shave the beard, you can comment in the Google or in the YouTube comments below. I'm going to post this on YouTube. I'm also going to post it in the class so you can have a look. This is my quarantine playoff beard. I don't know, it's looking pretty gray, right? Mr. Flynn's pretty old. Okay, so a few basics. Okay, the first thing I want to talk to you about is the concept of demand. It sounds like a word that like an economics person uses, or it sounds like a word that a teacher might use, but it's really very simple. And I'm going to show you what demand is. Okay, so here's an example of demand. So coming out, I think in this year, I might be wrong. Some of you are going to correct me, I'm sure. I think this year they're coming out with a new PS5. Okay, that's the brand new game console. So right now, PS4 is all the rage. I know a lot of people play PS4s. Well, the new one that's going to be coming out is the PS5, and it's brand new, right? And because it's new, so the question is, what is demand? Because this is new, it's a new console, right? It's supposedly, I mean, I don't know much about gaming, but supposedly it's going to have better graphics, it's going to have newer games, it's going to have faster playtime, you won't have downloads, or I'm not sure what all the features are, but it's going to be new, and it's going to be exciting, and it's going to be amazing. So because it's new and exciting, a lot of people will want this, right? So everyone wants it at the same time. When everyone wants something at the same time, that's what demand is. Demand just means people want something, okay? So now I'm going to walk you through a couple of scenarios here. So what would demand look like? Well, as an example, if a lot of people want the same thing and we don't have a lot of that thing, like say for example, diamonds, right? Now, there are a lot of diamonds, but how many diamonds are actually for sale at one time? There aren't that many, but a lot of people want diamonds. So what do you think happens to the price of something like diamonds if everybody wants something and there aren't a ton of them to go around? What do you think? Yes, the price is going to go up, right? It's going to go more and more expensive. More people want something. There's not a lot of it, so the price is going to go up. Okay, let me give you an example. Okay, so I want you to try and imagine with me that let's say that we're taking a class trip. Now, we're not really going to take a trip, but just in our brains, right? So on this class trip, I'm going to go class trip number 1 and class trip number 2. So the first class trip, okay? The first class trip is to a Pepsi factory where they make Pepsi. And as we start our class trip, everyone gets a refillable Pepsi cup, right? A mug or something like this. Like picture a big super, like my tea right here, a big super big gulp, this big. You get to carry it around the factory. And every 50 feet in the factory, there's one of those fountain machines. You know, they have at like a fast food restaurant where you can just push a button and fill up your thing with Pepsi. And pretend that we're taking a tour of the factory and we're there for 8 hours. And for 8 straight hours, you're drinking pop, you're drinking pop, you're drinking pop, you're drinking pop. So by the time we leave that factory, your belly feels a bit like a waterbed, right? Squishy. You ever drank so much liquid where you can hear the liquid moving around in your belly, right? So that's how full you are of liquid, and you are tired of sugar. Like you just had so much pop, you can't have any more. And then at the end of that tour, I pull out a nice cold can of Pepsi, and I want to try and sell it to you for $10. Are you going to pay me $10 for this cold can of Pepsi after drinking Pepsi for 8 hours in a factory? Well, no. So I'm like, okay, nobody wants it for $10. Okay, $5. Are you going to pay $5? No, of course not. $1. Well, no, you're all pretty full of pop. $1. I don't even want a can of pop for $1. What if I tried to sell it for 25 cents? After all that pop you just had and your belly's full, you probably would not want to even buy that can of pop for 25 cents. Even though at the store, it's way more than 25 cents. Even though you're getting a good deal, you're like, no, I don't want it. So there's no demand for that Pepsi. So the Pepsi isn't worth a lot of money right now. Now, let's go on class trip number 2. Okay, so class trip number 2, instead of a Pepsi plant, now I take the whole class and we go out to the desert. And we're going to be looking at cacti, like, a cactus and a whole bunch of them around. We're going to be looking at lizards, and it's hot. I mean, it is so hot. Like, you know it gets so hot, you can see the heat waves coming up off of the surface, it's that hot, and it's dry. And we get out there at 9 in the morning, and it's already 98 degrees, or about 32 degrees Celsius, right? It's hot, right? And as we're walking around, it's just getting hotter. So by the end of the day, it's 38 degrees. And we've had no water. I haven't stopped for a rest, and we're just walking and taking a tour. And Mr. Flynn, let's go, guys, let's go, let's keep walking. And we are so thirsty. Like, you're so thirsty that your throat hurts. Your tongue feels like it's starting to swell up. And now I pull out the same ice cold can of Pepsi. Do you think I could get $1 for this Pepsi now? If you all had money on you, do you think you'd pay $1 for this Pepsi? Well, sure you would, right? But the problem is I've got 25 students with me and everybody wants the same Pepsi. So what do you think is going to happen to the price of the Pepsi? So I would say, who wants this for $1? Oh, everyone does. I'll pay $2. I'll pay $5. I'll pay $10. I bet you if you had enough money, I could sell that Pepsi for any amount of money as long as you had that money in your pocket. That's what we call an increase in demand, right? Everyone wants or demands that Pepsi, so the price is going to go way up. Okay, so hopefully you know what demand is now, and now I want to talk to you about the business cycle. This is important because it's going to lead us up to something that happens in 1929. A really big economic event happens on October 29th, 1929. Can you guess what that is? I'm not going to tell you in this video, but it's coming up. We're going to learn about it. Okay, and I bet you some of you already know. If you wanted to look it up, that'd be good research too. Okay, so what I want to talk to you about today is the business cycle. Now, again, I'm sorry about my diagrams. I'm not an artist, but I'm doing my best. And I'm just doing this to hopefully help us to understand what these things are. Okay, so this is what we call the business cycle. You can see it labeled here in the center, the business cycle, right? And on my business cycle, I have 5 kind of key points. I'm going to talk about each of them as I'm going around. Right now, I'll just name them, right? So we have, for example, demand, which we just talked about, production, employment, wages, and spending. Okay, so let's go back to the PS5 example, right? So right now, a lot of people are very interested in getting a new PS5. Now, I can't afford it right now. I don't know if you can, but a lot of people are really interested in it, right? So that means that there's a lot of demand. What that means is we want stuff. And in this case, we're talking about a PS5. So we want a PS5. The demand is there. People want it. So because people want it, well, companies are going to produce it. This is what we call production. We need to make stuff. If we want to make money, we better start making PS5s because a lot of people want them. So we can make a lot of money if we make PS5s and then sell them. So demand, then production. Okay, so demand leads to production. See the arrow? And then because we need to produce things, well, we need workers to do that. So we're going to hire people. And this is what we call employment, right? So demand means we need to produce something that leads to production. The production leads to employment because we need to hire workers to make the stuff. So it says we need workers to help make stuff, right? In this case, a PS5. And because people are employed, or now they have jobs, well, guess what? We have to pay them, right? So we have to pay people for that work, and that's what we call wages. Now, what do people do with wages? Wages are money. What do people do with wages? Well, of course, they go out and spend it, not just on PS5s, but other things too. So they're employed, they have wages, and they go out and spend. What are they going to spend their money on? Yeah, PS5s, but they're also going to buy jeans, and they're going to buy junk food, and they're going to buy, maybe they're going to put a down payment on a car. Whatever that is, they're going to be spending their money out there. And when they're spending, that creates more demand for other things, like the jeans, like the car, like the junk food, right? Demand goes up. Well, guess what? Now more people, because they have wages and they're spending, there's more demand for all this other stuff. Now we have to produce a lot of this other stuff. We have to produce jeans and junk food and cars. Well, now we have to hire more people. And more people are making more money, and they're going out and spending, and then there's more demand. So it's so you see why we call it a cycle? A cycle just means it goes in a circle. So everything is pushing the next thing. Does that kind of make sense? I hope this makes sense. If you have any questions, I'll pause right now. If you have any questions, I want you to send me an email, or you can use the one-to-one chat that I set up in our classroom. So if you go to discussions on the hub, you can go check that out. Okay, so far? Okay, now I'm going to go so by the way, this is how things get better in an economy. An economy is just the way that we exchange money and goods like stuff and services, like your dentist, your lawyer, your doctor. Those are services. Like your dentist doesn't make anything. Your dentist just helps you keep healthy with your teeth, right? So that's what we call a service. All that stuff together is called the economy. Now, that's how things get better. right? So more people are hired, more wages, they're more spending, more demand. Now, what if things go the other direction? What if things are bad for some reason? So there's not as much activity. And you could pick any point right here, any one of these, it doesn't matter which one you pick, and you can talk about a decrease, okay? So let's say, for example, let's pick employment because this is the easiest one, okay? So let's just say, for example, a new robot comes out, and this robot can do a whole bunch of jobs in a whole bunch of different factories. Actually, you know what? Instead of a robot, let's use an example that really looks like it might happen. Automatic vehicles, right? So vehicles that can drive themselves and find their way on the roads, right? So if we have vehicles that can do that, why do we need truck drivers? Why do we need bus drivers? Why do we need taxi drivers, right? Pretty scary because a lot of people work in these jobs. So if we have these automatic vehicles that can do these things, then we don't need those drivers. So what happens to all those people who are employed or are working in those jobs? They lose their jobs. So if we were to make overnight, all these vehicles automatic, transport trucks, buses, taxis, whatever, trains, make it all automatic, just a computer operates the vehicle, then all these people are unemployed. There's a lot of people out of a job. Well, guess what happens? Those people who don't have a job anymore don't have wages coming in. They're not making any money. Because they're not making any money, they're sure as heck not going out and spending any money. Does that kind of make sense, right? So they lost their job, now they lost their wages, now they can't make any money. So my father, when I was young, my father got laid off at a factory and we had no money coming in. It was a pretty tough time. Some of you can probably relate to that. This happens, unfortunately, to a lot of families. It happened to my family as well. And because of that, we could not spend any money on anything unless it was bills and whatever food we could get. That was it. So unemployment, wages decrease, so nobody's out there spending. So what happens to the demand of goods? Well, people aren't going out and buying junk food and jeans and new cars, right? So demand for those things goes down. Well, then we don't need to produce jeans and junk food and cars anymore. So what do you think happens to employment in those industries? That's right. People are losing their jobs, right? So unemployment happens in those industries and it keeps getting worse because now fewer people are making wages. There's even less spending in the economy, less demand for stuff, and therefore production has to go down. This is what we call a downward spiral. So this is how bad things happen in an economy. Okay, so I've thrown a few terms at you today, and I have a couple more terms to throw at you at the end just to think about. So the terms that we learned about what demand is, right? So that's just when people want stuff. And then we learned about 5 key parts of a business cycle. Okay, so we learned about demand, which leads to production, which leads to employment, which leads to wages, which leads to spending. And when people are spending, that ties back into demand. And therefore, so it's one big cycle going around. And when things are getting better, things keep getting better. And when things are getting worse, they keep getting worse because all of these things are connected, if that makes any sense. Okay, 2 more terms to throw at you. The first term is a recession. So I want you to think back to elementary school. Do you remember elementary school? I don't know why they took this out of high school, but back in elementary school, you guys had recess, right? So you have a chunk of learning in the morning, then recess, and then a chunk of learning in the second part of the morning, and then lunch, right? So recess, keep that, because that's the root word of recession. So I want you to think about the economy taking a break, right? Just like recess, you're taking a break from learning. The economy is taking a break from doing well. So everything's going okay, and all of a sudden it goes in recession. There's less spending, less demand, and all that stuff I just talked about. Okay, that's recession. But usually it comes back up. So if you look at an economy, it goes up, down, like this. Recession, prosperity, recession, prosperity. So things do well. That's the first term is recession. So just think about recess, taking a break. The economy is taking a break from doing well. That's bad. But what's really worse is one more steep, okay? And it's called a depression. Not depression like we feel sad, although that is a word that means the same thing or something similar. But in this case, when we talk about a depression, that's a recession, but really, really severe. So things are really bad. Okay, so why am I talking about a depression? Well, I'm kind of hinting at one of the things we might be learning about as we're moving forward. Okay, now the last thing I'll say to you is, before I give you a little message at the end, the last thing I will say to you about this economics is I want you to think about what's happening right now in the world. So one of the questions I get all the time is, Mr. Flynn, why do we have to learn history? That's a great question. Okay, now one of the reasons why we have to learn history is so that we can understand what happens if something similar happens next time. So, if you're watching the news at all, you're probably hearing the terms recession and depression. And if you do a quick Google search, recession or depression 2020, I want you to try and sort of learn about that. By the end of today, I want you to try and read one article anywhere on the internet that talks about what the economy is doing right now because of this coronavirus. Just think about it, right? A lot of people can't go to work. And because a lot of people can't go to work, they're not getting wages. And because they're not getting wages, well, man, they're not spending, right? And that's the dangerous thing. That's why our government has instituted some plans to try and get some money to some families. And maybe some of your families have taken advantage of this, and I hope that you're doing okay. And all the best to you and your families. Okay, my heart's heavy for you all. So that is in an effort to try and get people to survive, but also to get people to keep spending. Because if you want the economy to keep going, people have to keep spending money. Okay, so you're going to take what you learned, and then you're going to apply it to today when you read a news article. Now, your homework from this lesson right here is I want you to go and find a family member. Doesn't matter who, or somebody that's in your household. Okay, if you a guardian, a brother, a sister, whoever's in your household, don't go outside of your household because we're quarantined, right? Stay safe, social distancing. But find somebody, and I want you to teach them two things. The first thing I want you to teach them is what demand is, and the second thing I want you to try and teach somebody else are the 5 points of a business cycle. Okay, so you can rewatch this video and you can write them down, but I'll go over it just one last time and then I'll stop, okay? So demand, that we want stuff, that has to be made, so that's production, we have to produce stuff. Well, we need people to do that, so we need workers, so that's employment, we hire people. Well, they don't do it for free, so we have to pay them, well, that's wages. What do people do with their wages when they get paid? Well, they go out and spend it, and when they spend it, that makes demand, okay? And it's a cycle that keeps going. So that's your homework, okay? In addition to working on your 1920 self, I also want you to find a family member and teach them what you learned today. Okay, I'm going to do this every once in a while. I know that you're busy working on that big project because it is what we call, it's a core strand task, so it's a big task for this strand or this bit of study. And we're moving toward the end of the 1920s, and we're going to start into World War II. Hopefully next week, okay? I'm trying not to give you too much, but I'm trying to give you a bit as we go. So let me know how I'm doing on that. Okay, all the best to you and your families. And again, I miss you guys, and I hope you're all doing well, okay? Take care, and please keep checking the hub and stay in touch.